Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics. And today I'm going to be covering my Senate prediction for the 2024 election. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment down below. And so for the safe Republican states on this map, you're going to have Utah, Wyoming, North Dakota, both Nebraska elections. Even though the polling data from Nebraska's election does suggest that it could be a competitive race, as Dan Osborne, the independent candidate, is only behind by 4 points in his latest poll against the incumbent Senator Fisher, I do believe she will still win this race by over 10 percentage points. If we go to the state of Missouri, I believe Hawley would win re-election fairly easily. He's currently leading by around 14 percentage points against his opponent. If we look at the state of Tennessee, I expect Blackburn to win pretty easily. She's polling ahead in the latest poll by 17 percentage points. But either way, I think she's probably going to win the state by about 20 percentage points or so, as my model does have Donald Trump winning the election here fairly easily. Mississippi would also be in the safe Republican column, as well as the state of Indiana. If we look at West Virginia, it's pretty interesting. The incumbent Senator Joe Manchin did actually drop out of the race, and they may actually swap him in to be the candidate for the Democratic governorship. That'd be pretty interesting if they'd swap him in as the Democratic candidate for the governorship. But as of right now, Jim Justice just won the primary in that state, and I believe he would have a very easy victory with whoever they put up as the Democrat. I think he would win this race fairly easily, and that'd be the first insta flip for Republicans this cycle. For the safe Democratic states, we have Washington, California. Even though, Schiff is leading by about 20 something points in the latest poll against Garvey, and Garvey seems to be a pretty captivating candidate, I still expect him to lose the race by over 10 percentage points. Hawaii can also be added into the safe Democratic column, as well as the state of New York. The incumbent here seems to be polling fairly well in the state, and I do think they're going to win by over 10 percentage points. I also believe in the state of Vermont, Bernie Sanders wins re-election fairly easily, as well as in Massachusetts. Warner seems to be leading her opponent there by about 23 percentage points in the latest poll, so I don't really see this race even being remotely competitive. The states of Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Delaware will also be in the safe Democratic column. I'm going to be adding Montana and Ohio into the safe Republican column. The reason I'm going to be adding these in the safe Republican column for over 10-point victories is because of the fact that Donald Trump's expected to win the state of Montana by 26 percentage points and 19 points in the state of Ohio, according to my latest model forecast, which will be linked in the top right corner of this video, so you can go watch my latest prediction. And so basically, looking at that metric, it's almost impossible for these candidates to underperform Trump by over 5 to 10 percentage points. Donald Trump has never won a state federally and not taken the race at the Senate level with him at the same time. Now, I do believe that streak is going to be broken in certain states like Minnesota and possibly New Mexico, but for a state like Montana and Ohio, which have gotten more Republican because of Donald Trump, I do suspect that these states will actually carry their Senate candidates over by over 10 points, and a lot of this hype for the Democratic candidates to win will be very overblown at the end of the day. I also expect Texas to end up being in the safe Republican column. Donald Trump is supposed to win the state by about, 15, 16 points or so. And so I do believe that is a pretty massive victory. And I think Ted Cruz will only run a couple of points behind him as of right now. Despite Florida being a 16-point victory in my model as of right now, I do expect Rick Scott to be one of the Republicans who underperforms Donald Trump on the national level by a pretty decent amount, to the point where I think he's going to win the race by under 10 points, but he should still be winning re-election fairly easily. If we look at the state of New Jersey, I actually have Donald Trump within striking distance of winning the state, and I do actually think that this race could be under 10 points. The incumbent Democratic Senator Bob Menendez has also ended up just completely dropping out of the race and even posed to run an independent campaign. But with the non-incumbent running and the state possibly being closer on the federal level, I do actually expect this to narrow up by a couple of points, possibly be a 6 or 7 point victory for the Democratic candidate. My model currently has the state of Maine very, very competitive. And so I do think Angus King will still hold on, but I think it'll be one of his closer election victories that we've seen from him in the past couple of years. I do think he'll win the race by about 8 percentage points. My model does have the race as a tilt margin as of right now on the presidential level, but I think Angus King will pull enough independent support in order to hold his seat. And you can see Republicans already hold 52 Senate seats as of right now. They are already winning the Senate with 52 seats, and we haven't even covered the lean seats in this category. If we look at the state of New Mexico, it is pretty interesting because my model does have the race within a tilt margin on the presidential level for incumbent President Joe Biden. So I do actually think on the Senate level, it could get within 5 points. You know, the thing is, guys, on presidential years, the candidate who is basically mirroring the top of the ticket. So, like, if there's a presidential candidate and they win the state, and there's a Senate candidate, they don't really tend to differ too much. The president really controls the environment in the state. And so I do think the Democrat will outperform Joe Biden by a few points, but not to the point where they're going to be winning it by a likely margin. I suspect that they win their Senate race by around 3 or 4 points as of right now. Minnesota is a pretty interesting state because we do have an electoral juggernaut in Amy Klobuchar. She won her last race by about 24 points in 2018, and she is currently leading in the latest poll by around 14 to 17 percentage points. However, I actually expect Donald Trump to take the state on the federal level. However, since it is such a close margin, I do expect her to still win her race by over 5, but I do think it's going to be one of her closest election victories, possibly a 7 or 8 point win on the Senate level as of right now. According to Fabrizio and Lee Associates, the state of Virginia does have a new poll where Tim Kaine, the incumbent senator, is leading Hung Cao, the supposed Republican nominee that seems to be winning the primary fairly easily, is losing the race by about 12 percentage points. Tim Kaine leads Hung Cao by around 12 points. However, the state on the federal level in my model is a 1.7 percentage point victory for Joe Biden. And so I actually do expect this state to narrow up quite significantly on the Senate level. I think Tim Kaine probably wins it by around 3 or 4 points, similar to how New Mexico would be on this map. And we are finally narrowing down to the competitive states this cycle. We can see I left Maryland open because of the fact that the former governor, Larry Hogan, is now the Republican nominee, and he is running against the weaker Democratic candidate, also Brooks, who has been polling worse against him in every single poll as of right now. There could be a pretty big polling error. However, the polling with the Democratic primary was sort of basically accurate. I mean, it wasn't that off per se. She was leading in the last couple of polls. And so I do think that she would underperform Trone. And so I am actually going to put this in the lean Democratic category. Biden is currently projected to win the state of Maryland by 26 points in my latest forecast, unlike his 33-point victory from 2020 just 4 years ago. And so I do think it will end up pushing Larry Hogan closer and closer. Now, there is a poll out of Maryland that does actually have the race, within 17 points, on the presidential level. I believe if Biden were to win the race by 17 points on the presidential level, I think Larry Hogan would generally have a real shot of actually winning the Senate seat here. And that would kind of upend this map completely because we'd have an additional seat. However, he is considered to be a rhino Republican. And so Republicans may want to have him, just for purposes of keeping the Senate, but not necessarily of any, policy substance. For the state of Arizona, we can see the latest poll does have Gallego beating her by 13. However, I do think that is an outlier poll, as most of the polls have showed Gallego leading around 3 to 6 points as of right now. Kari Lake is currently projected to win the state of Arizona by around a point or two because of the fact Donald Trump is actually leading there by around 8.5 percentage points, according to my latest forecast. And so I do think that because of the fact Donald Trump is winning the state by such a significant amount, I do think she'll actually be carried over. Unfortunately, if Donald Trump even wins by 3 or 4 points, I still think she goes down at the Senate level. However, since Donald Trump is expected to have such a massive victory on the Senate level as well as on the electoral college, I actually think he will be able to pick off the state of Arizona for her and carry her to the top. Donald Trump is forecasted to win the state of Nevada by 10.1%. According to my latest forecast, Sam Brown in the latest polling is shown to be pretty competitive. He is tied with likely voters in the latest poll from early May. And so I do actually suspect that he'd be able to win this race by around 3 to 4 points, with Donald Trump carrying him over the finish line. And we have finally come to the Rust Belt states as of right now. Polling here in Wisconsin does show Tammy Baldwin beating Eric Hovde, who I actually think is a pretty good candidate for Wisconsin. They actually fielded a decent candidate here. And so since Donald Trump is projected to win the state of Wisconsin by over 9 points, I do actually think that he would win the state by about a point or two. However, he does underperform Trump pretty significantly here. In the state of Michigan, the latest poll currently has the race pretty competitive, and so with Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, winning the state by almost 7 points, I still think that the Republican candidate will make it over the finish line in the state of Michigan as of right now. As of right now, Pennsylvania is projected to be an 8.5 point victory for Donald Trump on the national level. However, the polling in Pennsylvania does show Bob Casey beating Dave McCormick, who I don't think is the best Republican nominee there. However, once again, since Donald Trump is winning the state by so much, I actually think that Dave McCormick might actually be able to pull this one out. It will be closer than Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. I think it would come down to the wire. Bob Casey is a pretty strong candidate. It's just that a Republican has not won Pennsylvania by over 5 percentage points in eons as of right now. And so you have not seen that kind of top of the ticket before in quite some time. So I do think Bob Casey will more than likely be able to pull this out. I mean, he definitely could pull it out still, even in this kind of national environment. However, I do think Dave McCormick, because of the fact Donald Trump is leading the state by almost 9 percentage points, which would be a historical defeat of a Democrat in the state, within modern history, I do think that Dave McCormick will be carried just ever so slightly over the top in this scenario. So I have Republicans at 57 Senate seats to Democrats 43 Senate seats as of right now. If you guys did enjoy my analysis, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to follow the Twitter and join the Discord in the description down below. And I will see you guys very, very soon.